Is the minutes. Everybody read those? Changes, corrections, motion?
Motion to receive minutes.
I'd second.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Okay, looks like the minutes are approved. Next item I've got on the agenda is continuance, request, withdrawals. First, do we have anybody by staff?
Avenue. I'd like to request an indefinite continuance of case number 15128. It was a variance request at 400 East Hill Street. And we apologize for the late request. We just received word from the Plan Review Department that they do not believe this variance is needed any longer. And so that's why we're asking for the indefinite continuance. If it's determined that the variance is needed, with the indefinite continuance, a renotice will have to occur. So any interested parties would be notified again prior to another hearing. I know there's a neighbor here. We've been communicating with him today about that. I'm not sure if they'd like to add anything to that, but that is our request.
Yeah, I've got a Keith Winter. Is that, did I get the last name right? Winter? Yes, sir. All right.
Hello, I'm Keith Winter. Council members, thank you for your time. Since he's changing the variance, I'm not sure if this applies. We were going to oppose what he had there, and so if I should go ahead, let me know, or if I should not, you just tell me what you'd like me to do.
Most of the time when someone asks for a continuance, we'll grant it. And so if this one's granted and it comes back, you'll get notice again.
Okay, thank you.
So is there anybody else that wanted to speak on this one?
Hi, I'm Krista Lamb from DeechWorks. I'm the Director of Facilities there across the street from the property, and I'm also here to object.
Okay. All right. You'll get notice again if this one is continued and they bring it back.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? All right, we got a request for a continuance. Comments from the board? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Sorry. Continue case number 15128 indefinitely.
Okay. Got a motion? We have a second? Got a second? Cast your votes when you get the screen. Okay, you're continued indefinitely. Anybody else have a request for a continuance or withdrawal? No consent docket, so we can go ahead and start with number one.
Okay, item number one, case number 15130, request of Crabtree Homes for a variance to side yard setbacks in the PUD 153 located at 11040 Northwest 19th Street.
Good afternoon. If you'd give us your name and address for the record, and then go ahead and tell us about your application.
Okay, yeah, Thomas Crabtree with Crabtree Homes, 812 West Main, Yukon. And yeah, we're just applying for a variance on the yard setback.
One and a half.
Did the mortgage survey catch this?
Yes.
Yes. It was, what, a foot and a half max?
Yeah, this street's at a little bit of an angle and it's kind of hard to see out there on
Yeah,
site.
it's
And
kind of
so the-
typical, unfortunately.
Yeah, the back of the house was good and we just a little tight on the front.
Good thing it's located on a corner.
What's that?
I said, good thing it's located on a corner, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, most of these we see end up being on corner lots or
Yeah.
in a subdivision or a cul-de-sac.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
No, I don't have any issues. It's not substantial.
I don't
No?
have any.
Okay. I don't have anybody signed up to speak. Is there anybody wanting to speak on this item? If not, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I move that we approve case number 15130 on the grounds that it meets the statutory standards for a variance.
Got a motion, we got a second?
Yeah.
Second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 2, case number 15124, request of Matt Graves on behalf of Fowler Holding Company for a variance to the architectural regulations in the C3 located at 55 West Interstate.
Yes, my name is Matt Graves. I live at 306 Trail Ridge Drive in Norman.
Okay, go ahead.
So we were requesting a variance from the ordinance that limits the use of metal in C3 to 20% of the facade. Originally, the building was designed to to manufacturer standards in 2003. The existing facade consists of approximately 40% ephes and 60% glazing. The Stellantis is the manufacturer of those automobile brands, and they require certain design standards of their dealers. So we're in the middle of an update, and they use a aluminum composite material. So, and we're changing the entire facade to reflect their current brand images. So, there's some renderings that showing what the current building looks like, and then what the proposed elevations are supposed to look like.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board?
From the time that I've served on the planning commission, I've learned a little bit about ephes, and this seems to be better than ephes, I guess. What they tell me. They tell ephes is bad, you know, these metal buildings, we need to update the code for that, but yeah, I think it looks fine.
Yeah. I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. Is there anybody here who wanted to address this item? If not, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I'll move to approve case number 15124 for the reason that it meets statutory requirements for a variance.
I second.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 3, case number 15126, request of Dalmark Signs on behalf of Putnam City Schools for various sign regulations at 2909 North Ann Arbor Avenue.
Hello, my name is Shabron Brookings, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Putnam City School District. The address is 2909 North Ann Arbor Avenue. I am also the former principal of this particular school, and we're just looking for better ways to be more efficient and effective with our communications with our patrons and stakeholders, particularly our parents and community members. Right now, we have an antiquated marquee that's the single stick-on letters, and we're looking to move that to a digital marquee. We have changing demographics in this area. About 65% of the families are Hispanic, and with this digital marquee, we'll be able to not only put messages up in English, but also Spanish. And about 8 years ago, there was huge traffic issues on Ann Arbor doing drop-off and pickup. We had cars on the street blocking Ann Arbor's, and families couldn't get in, fire department, police couldn't get in, and so the district built a car loop to go around the back of the school. Now it takes up about 175 cars, which clears the traffic. The problem is the majority of the car rider drop-off and pickups, they don't go to the front of the school, and so they can't see the sign. So what this variance allows us to do is to put a sign in the front and also the side where the car rider pickup is. We are taking down 2 signs and just adding these 2, so we're not adding any additional signs, and we just want to be able to better communicate to our families.
Questions, comments from the board?
As a board member, I would just like to commend you and the school for considering the families and the students first, so I truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
And on that grounds, I would like to approve that we accept case number 15126 on the grounds that it meets the statutory requirements for a variance.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. I didn't have anybody signed up to speak. Is there anybody who wants to address this item? If not, cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you very much.
So item number 4 was continued indefinitely. Item number 5, case number 151, request of Johnson Associates on behalf of the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal for a variance to signage, height, setback, fencing at 240 Centennial Drive.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is an agenda item that is actually attached to an item that went before the Scenic River Committee this morning at 9 a.m. We had about an hour and 20-minute long presentation that we'd like to start now. Or if you'd prefer we avoid the hour and 20-minute, I can tell you that the Scenic River Committee did approve this design. They also recommended approval of each of the variances we seek. So, Cindy, do you have the site plan? Let's start with the area. There we go. We'll start with the aerial. So if you can go back one. So this location is perhaps the definition of a unique location. It exists in an area that was formerly occupied by Interstate 40. It is now a patch of grass that sits between the overflow parking lot that exists for Bass Pro and that lower portion of the canal. So it is really kind of in no man's land, if you will. And do you have an aerial? If you can imagine why this is even more unique, it is because it doesn't appear you do. It's all right. If we could, there we go. So here is this patch of grass, and when you think of the regulations that exist for our design districts, they exist because of what the staff was concerned about with the interaction from vehicular traffic, but also pedestrian traffic. So much of the regulations are geared towards that interaction of street frontage. Well, we have no street frontage. Again, we have a parking lot to our east, we have the Bricktown Canal to our west and to our south, and to the north, although it is a street, it is the Oklahoma City Boulevard, and at the subject site, it is 23-foot elevated above grade. So there is no street frontage. It's hard to imagine anything being developed here from a building standpoint other than some form of destination. You wouldn't want to put an office building there, you wouldn't want to put any retail there, because there's no street that you might find yourself there. But in order to try to activate these uses that are south of the boulevard, this type of use we believe to be quite perfect. So the truck yard is the concept, and if I could get staff to maybe go through some of those images, sorry, Paula. it's an outdoor food court concept. So this is a product that is very popular in Texas. It is a very fast-growing company, and it is a unique type of design that they have that is kind of along the lines of what they are trying to do with their brand, location to location. So because of that, and because of the unique nature of the site, it required us to get some variances, a variance to the signs. So the sign height and size variances we seek we have 3 signs in particular. One of the questions asked this morning at the Scenic River Committee was, what is the sign height compared to the height of the building that we propose? The signs are shorter than the building. So these signs are what they have across the country. This particular, the truck yard sign, is a vintage sign that's been refurbished. It was an old motel sign along Route 66. And it's also considered a pole sign. Now, when you think of pole sign, what I said this morning, you think of North May Avenue. Perhaps that's the poster child for bad signage. Those are ugly metal poles with a big image on top. This sign is not that, but by the definition of the code is a pole sign. But you'll notice it's clad in brick. It doesn't meet what I think the code was trying to get rid of when it prohibited pole signs. All the signage components within this were, again, recommended for approval by the Scenic River Committee. So we also have a height variance, again, for the reasons that we've got this kind of unique oddity with the boulevard being 23 feet above our grade. It was deemed that the height variance was appropriate for the same reason, the setback. So again, at the outset, I discussed that our codes and regulations for downtown areas are really geared towards that street. And so we want our frontages or the building setbacks to be at or within 10 feet of the street. Well, when your street frontage is a 23-foot elevated highway, that no longer applies. So we do exceed what the build-to line would be. But again, the Scenic River, based upon the uniqueness of this site, felt like it was appropriate. And finally, the fence height. Our fence package is a bit unique. The materials are approved, so that is not something that's at issue here. But I believe it was the height along the canal, and if we go to the aerial, we'll see it. Excuse me, the site plan. I'm sorry, Cindy. There we go. So the top of the screen, which would be the west, there is a short fence that exists to kind of provide a line of demarcation. So staff analyzed it based upon the regulations and found that because you can still see over it and see into the canal and see the monuments that exist, that staff was supportive of it based upon all of the factors that I've just described. So the overall design was approved this morning with a recommendation to this board for approval of each of the 4 variances. We have other people here that can address specific design-related questions if you have them, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments from the board?
Nope. I think it looks like a great project and good infill for this area.
Yeah.
It is.
I like it.
Okay. I didn't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. Is there anybody who wants to address this item? Okay, if not, I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make it. Motion to approve case number 15130 for the reasons that it meets the requirements for variance.
I'll second.
Is it 29? What did I say?
230.
23. Yeah, 129.
I'd second, yes.
Okay. We got a
Hey.
motion and a second. Go ahead and cast your votes.
That's going to be a good outside.
Yeah, that would be great. When's it open, David?
Pardon? Okay. Okay.
Opening anytime soon?
Oh, when's it opening?
Yeah, next year. Yeah, right. Yeah,
We'll save you a seat.
good luck. Yeah, I'll come check it out.
Want to eat and drink free.
All
Item number 6, case number 15106, request of David Box on behalf of Don A. Redevelopers for a variance to setbacks, maneuvering, landscape, parking layout dimension, and 5124 Classen Circle.
Again, good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, who's also here with us, as well as the civil engineer. So, if you're familiar with the site, you will, I think, no doubt remember the great controversy that erupted several years ago when a local ice cream store was going to remove these buildings in favor of building a new building. The property has sold since then, and the new owner has plans to revitalize the property, bring it back to what kind of it was in its original form. And based upon the nature of the way that the property sits and the way that Classen Circle has been redone over the years, it requires us to seek a few variances. So at the outset, I think it's important that we note the variances are intended to be able to keep the buildings in place as they are historically constructed. So I will start with the parking lot layout. So this image shows you the areas that we're seeking the variance. And so right here, the parking lot layout, we are seeking a reduction in the drive aisle width. There was a lot of discussion about this item. We actually continued it, I think, for a good period of time to meet with staff. And one of the trade-offs that we agreed to make was we will shrink down the drive aisle, which still can have plenty of room for cars to maneuver, but in so doing, it's going to allow us to provide for a 5-foot sidewalk. So the 5-foot sidewalk was something that was deemed very important by planning staff. So in order to accomplish that, we're going to need to skinny down our drive aisle width. So we don't perceive it to be a problem. The engineering staff has reviewed it, to my knowledge, and signed off on it. We think overall, because this is still kind of urban core, providing the sidewalk is of greater benefit than a wider drive aisle. And as it relates to parking, it's also worth noting, because there was a comment in the staff report, the only unfavorable was reducing the number of parking spaces could provide space for standard sidewalks. Well, we are providing standard sidewalks, but I think the flaw in staff's analysis is they are looking at the variance request in a vacuum rather than the entirety of the site. And so, yes, as it relates to just this building, perhaps we are overparked. But when you consider that this parking is also intended to serve all of the existing buildings within this triangle, we don't believe that we are overparked, and we think we're providing adequate parking so that we don't have the problem with the excessive parking spilling out into the residential area that exists immediately south of 50th Street. As it relates to the front yard setback, what this image is intended to show is why we need it. So this is going to be a patio. The location of the patio on this exhibit is right here along Classen Circle. We believe it engages the streetscape, it engages that pedestrian corridor that we hope to have around the site. And so having that patio for the restaurant we think to be an important piece that will not only serve this development, but also bring additional people to the area. So we think that is something that would be of benefit. Everybody likes sitting on a patio, and those uses right there we think to be appropriate. The parking and maneuvering in the right-of-way, that's reflected in these boxes on the outside. So a lot of that parking exists. And when we think of parking and maneuvering in the right-of-way, it's not uncommon in the urban core. If you live in a traditional single-family home, undoubtedly you also maneuver in the right-of-way when you reverse out into the street and move forward. If you're familiar with this area, Military, Classen Circle, it is a very slow-moving traffic area. So we do not believe that on-street parking in this area will be a problem. In fact, it is commonplace in the urban core that you have on-street parking. We think it's going to provide a benefit, again, by getting parking that would otherwise perhaps spill into the neighborhood to the south off of that. And finally, the landscape regulations. Our problem is that the site is frankly fully developed, and in order to meet parking regulations, sidewalk regulations, and all of those things I discussed previously, we are going to need a variance to some of the landscaping requirements. We're going to add as much landscaping as we can, but we are going to fall short, I think, of the total number of points required, but that will, again, allow us to have sidewalks. So we think, overall, on balance, the variances will provide for the ability for these buildings to remain and for it to be successfully developed. be happy to answer any questions. Again, the only unfavorable talked about the number of parking spaces, but again, the total number of parking spaces is not just for what you see outlined in black. It's also intended to cover the entire development.
Questions, comments?
The parking they got now is all street parking, pretty much.
Sorry?
The parking they have now is all street parking.
Correct.
Pretty much, right? Yeah, and then some
And it's a lot
random stuff in the back and.
Yeah, and it's a lot of, there's, kind of no curb. It's just the street leads
Yeah,
into
it's-
where people park. So
That's
we think this will provide a more efficient use of space.
I think so too.
So I may have missed it during your talk, but in our paper, there's a concern from the Utilities Department. Did you address that?
We'll have to coordinate with the utility department. Whatever they tell us to do, we'll have to do. So
So-
that'll be worked out at building permit stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. Does everybody wants to address this item? If not, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I move that we approve case number 15106 for approval because it meets the statutory requirements for a variance.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
So suspenseful today.
Go get something to eat.
Hey, you're approved.
Be a while.
Yes.
Okay. Case number 15115, an application for a special exception of David Roth to allow home sharing at 8812 Northwest 114th.
Hi, my name is David Ralph. I live at 8812 Northwest 114th Circle, and I'm here seeking special exception for home sharing.
Okay, have you had a chance to look at the protest letters?
I did.
Okay.
Say you live there?
Have you had any discussions with any of the neighbors that signed the letters?
I've had some discussions. I think most people are kind of expecting the worst. I'm a real estate professional. I build homes and work in the area. I'm going to be real close to the house, probably within 5 minutes, so I'll be able to stay on top of it.
Do you own any other Airbnbs?
No.
Questions, comments from the board?
My only comment on your application is that you list that it's a 4-bedroom house and you plan to accommodate 6 guests. So can you just describe to the board what your sleeping arrangements would look like?
It'll just be no more than 6 guests, 2 in each of those rooms. There's 4 beds, but one is like a study.
Okay. All right. I've got some folks lined up. Oh, were there any other questions from the board?
No, you're okay with advertising off-street parking only, right? Just
Yeah,
in the
no.
driveway?
Yeah, driveway only.
Okay.
Will your guests have access to the garage?
Not the garage and not the HOA amenities like the pool and clubhouse area and stuff like that, just the home.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I noticed in some of the complaints, and maybe we'll get there in the protest, but they discussed a lot of the HOA rules and how your HOA rules prohibit home sharing, but I didn't see a copy of the rules or anything attached to your application. Do you want to speak on that portion?
Yes, I looked at the rules, and I deal with CNRs all the time as a builder, and I didn't see anything that prohibited that or restricts a term of a length of time for short-term rentals. I didn't see anything in there.
Yeah, frankly, it's beyond our purview anyway, so, you know, if that's the case, then you'll have to answer to the HOAs. I'm not worried about it.
Okay, any other questions, comments? I've got several people signed up to speak. So let's start with Julie Coffey. All right. Yeah, have a seat and we'll bring you back up in a minute. Okay, give us your name and address.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Coffey, and I'm a resident at 8808 Northwest 114th Circle, Oklahoma City, 73162. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to the board. I'd like to acknowledge the Chapel Creek residents that are in the room today, so I'd like them to stand and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you. These are my neighbors. Chapel Creek is located in northwest Oklahoma City on the east side of County Line between North Hafner and 122nd Street. My husband Leonard and I moved into the subdivision in February 2005 as empty nesters, and 17 and a half years later, we're now retired seniors. We bought a home here and are invested in this neighborhood because it has a culture of good neighbors. The applicant, David, is my husband and I, immediate neighbor to the west, and he has always been a good neighbor, and my husband and I have nothing but positive things to say about our relationship over the past 4 years. Today, we come to the board because the residents of Chapel Creek 2 oppose the special exception request for home sharing. We oppose first and foremost because it violates our HOA covenant. And I do have a copy of the covenant, Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, and it is in violation of that. In your packet, I trust that you did receive a copy of 9 pages of resident signatures opposing the applicant's request for home sharing, case number 15115. Today, we're asking the board to not approve this exception application because it is a direct violation of our HOA covenant and bylaws. Thank you so much for your service, and if no questions, I'll turn it over to our next speaker, and again, my neighbor, Scotty Dalton.
Okay, Scotty? Come up and give us your name and address, and go ahead and address the board.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Dalton. I live at 8816 Northwest 114th Circle. David is our neighbor just to the east of us. Just like Mrs. Coffey said, David's been a great neighbor. We've worked very closely together to keep the properties well maintained and kept up. He's been a good neighbor to us, but we also have to respectfully oppose his request today because it does violate the Homeowners Association rules. We are concerned about parking. There's a number of rules that apply to street parking, noise and things of that nature. Well, the home sharing is a thing that isn't, I know it's not clearly defined in the homeowners rules, but according to the attorney for the Homeowners Association, Attorney Witten, it is a violation, and he has, in my understanding, based on a conversation with him, spoken with Mr. Ruff and gave him a cease and desist to discontinue this application process. And so I'm not going to keep you here all day with long and drawn out things. We're concerned about noise. We're concerned we have 2 college-age kids going through the engineering program. That's our first and foremost concern, is to make sure that the peace and harmony and quiet that they need to get through this program that they're in is maintained. And we're kind of concerned because, you know, we watch the news like everybody else does, and there is some concerns about the number of noise complaints, parking complaints, and things of that nature that occur with home sharing Airbnbs and things of that nature. So that's our concern, is to try to maintain. We moved there almost 15 years ago, and it's been peace and harmony and balance. Kids run up and down the street. They enjoy their neighborhood, and we don't want to lose that. So if y'all have any questions at this time, I'll be glad to answer them.
Questions, comments?
All I'd say is HOA matters really don't apply to this board at all. So, I mean, I'm not even going to consider that, but
Okay.
for a short term, though, these, I've usually been doing about a year on them, just see how they go. But yeah, that's, and requiring the off-street parking is going to be for sure required in there, so. Street parking will not be allowed, is what I'm saying. But those are my comments.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
And the next one signed up, it looks like Sally. I can't read the last name.
My name is Sally Selvage, and I live at 8809 Northwest 113th Street. And David has been a really good neighbor. We had to have our sewer replaced last winter, and he let us, the access point was in his yard. And he was very gracious about us letting him tear up part of his yard. But our house backs up to his backyard, and we have really grave reservations about having a short-term rental. It not only devalues our property, but it's also against the neighborhood covenants. And we have a problem with who knows what going on back there. And we're retired, and we have 2 grandsons that come to visit that are 8 and 4, and I really don't want chaos back there.
Thank you. That's all I have signed up. Was there anybody else? Okay, David, you're back up. If you want to address those comments and concerns.
Yes. I will say that the home will not really be used for parties. Noise levels will be kept respectful, at a respectable level. I will not be letting guests, use a community pool and community amenities. Parking will be limited to the driveway. Again, I will allow anybody to contact me directly if we have any issues over there. I live about 5 minutes away from there, so I'll be really close by. I'm not going to be leasing the property every weekend with different people. I'm looking for a little bit of more of a mid to long-term leasing, but from time to time, I will be looking to maybe do a short-term rental, so that's why I want to get the approval for that. It won't be happening all the time, but I want to have the ability to do that. And I think that's all I have there.
Okay.
What are your planned quiet hours? I noticed that you said you would have them. What hours do you anticipate being your quiet hours?
Quiet hours, did I put something in my?
Yes, you said no noise, including loud music, respect quiet hours.
I would say from about 5 p.m. on, from 5 p.m.
Do you anticipate that you could potentially include that on your listing to tell your guests, when they check in, to respect your neighbors?
Sure, absolutely.
If your application's not approved, what are your plans for the property?
I would just probably do a different type of leasing, long-term, mid-term, long-term.
So regardless, your plan is to lease the property?
Yeah, I wanted to lease the property, yeah.
Sure. To just make a few comments about some of the concerns raised, a lot of the concerns we see are repetitive of regardless of location of the home. But, for instance, if you have a long-term renter in there and it's maybe not a good fit for the neighborhood, that could be, a lot more detrimental to the neighborhood characteristics than maybe a short-term renter who's staying 1 night or 2 nights and then has moved on. I just wanted to bring that to your neighbor's attention, just to something else to consider.
Sure. And I want to keep our relationship good and take care of the neighborhood and be respectful of everybody on the street. And so I will work with everybody on, any concerns at any time, so.
So I would like to speak directly to the neighbors too, because I've sat on this board for over 3 years now, and this is the first time I've ever seen a request for only 1 year. So to me, that's letting me know that he's very concerned about the neighbors as well, given the fact that most people who come before the board ask for up to 10 years. So again, we cannot do anything about those HOAs. However, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that the neighbors are still receiving the requests that they have received, as well as the person who's requesting the special exception is being considered as well. So thank you very much for putting in just for the 1 year. That's very considerate.
And there are a lot of people that are actually doing these without getting the license, as you probably know. I think
Yes.
starting to crack down on that. But being a real estate professional, being a home builder, I deal with CNRs, I deal with homeowners on a daily basis. I have to take care of warranties and work in the area. So I think it'll be different between someone like myself and someone that's more of a by night, just trying to do an Airbnb, throw something together. And like I said, I'm looking for a little bit more of a longer term rental than every weekend, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yeah. Do you have something additional? Okay. If you'll have a seat, and let's bring her back up.
I would like to read part of Article 10, Section 1. All lots within the existing property are hereby classified as single-family lots. Each such lot shall be used exclusively for single-family residential purposes and for the exclusive use and benefit of the owner thereof provided. No gainful occupation, profession, business, trade, or other non-residential activities shall be conducted on any lot or in any residence or detached structure located thereon. So I did want to share that. In addition, I'd like to say that the applicant, David, has not consulted with or discussed with any of the residents that are here today. And we are all adjacent neighbors. And so he's not shared any of this. He's not asked for any of our thoughts or discussed this with us. And given that, I'd like to ask the board, if you are considering approving this, that you would give neighbors, especially those adjacent and anyone in our community, and for that matter, on our street, because we do have several grade school age children that actively play on this street. And I know there are parents that have signed the petition or the letter that was submitted to you, and they were greatly concerned about that fact, that their children actively play on this street, and they are concerned about the traffic level. But given all of that, I'd like to ask the board if you would consider the opportunity for us to visit with David, if you are considering approving his application. But prior to that, we would ask that you would give us the opportunity to meet with him, discuss, negotiate terms. One of the things that we are very concerned about is that who would monitor the residents. There are some guidelines that he has suggested. We'd like to add to those guidelines. We have additional thoughts on what those guidelines should be set at. But also, is there a management company? Who would manage if there are problems in the day or the night? As residents, we are immediately impacted. So how can we respond to that in a very on-time manner? So I'd like to ask you all to consider giving us the opportunity to sit down with David and visit about how we can set guidelines that are more satisfactory to not only him, but also the residents that would be most impacted by this situation. Any questions? Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you.
David?
I'd be more than open to that, be more than willing to do that with them to.
Okay.
And as far as the management of the property, it would be myself. We also have security cameras on the house, so I'll be monitoring anything that's going on the outside of the house. If there's any parties or something spills over into the street or anything like that, we'll be monitoring it. And like I said, I'm probably about 5 minutes away in an adjacent neighborhood. I just moved to a new house, so I work in the area. I build homes in 2 or 3 neighborhoods surrounding the area, so I would just basically handle it myself and run over. And anyone in the neighborhood could have my contact information directly to get with me if there's any issues. And that would be for any time. It wouldn't matter what time of day or night, there's a problem. And that's generally what I do with my customers anyway, so.
Okay, so 2-week continuance, I think 20th is our next meeting, right, guys?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks will be 20th on Thursday, yeah.
October 20th.
I'll make a motion to continue, case number 15115 to the October 20th meeting.
I second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to continue. Cast your votes. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
May I make a comment, please? So we just continued this for 2 weeks so that the neighbors understand this is the time for you to take that opportunity to discuss with him, because when he comes back in 2 weeks, if you're not here and the discussion is not concluded, then we may be at the same point where the board will make that decision.
Okay. Why don't you speak to the applicant during the...
No, for the board.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we're somewhat confused as neighbors and just wanted clarification to what you said in response to your stance for HOA covenants and bylaws.
We have no stance and it has no relevant bearing whatsoever.
We have no jurisdiction over that.
Okay.
At all.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next.
Item number 8, case number 15119, special exception of Sawana Hutton to allow home sharing located at 3928 Taylor Lane.
Hi, my name is Sawaya Hutton. I purchased the house in Yukon 2 years ago. I lived here until I got married in April and moved to Tulsa. I'm currently working 2 days a week back in Oklahoma City, and I'm here to try to get the special exemption for home sharing so that I might be able to do Airbnb, lease out my house sometimes during the weekends when I'm not there, just to bring in some extra income. I'll be there one day or once a week to do the upkeep on it. I have been doing that since I moved in April. I too realized I live in an HOA, and when I started this process, I was trying to go about it the right way, and I contacted the neighbors and did everything that they requested to send that out. And I know that there was some people in the HOA that instantly said that this was against the bylaws and everything else. I decided to go ahead and pursue it because I don't want to go against the rules, but they do allow long-term rentals, which to me decreases the home's value and the neighborhood's value. And I think we would have to probably go in front of them and try to see if that can be changed. I realize that you guys don't have any say one way or the other on the HOAs, but I wanted to be able to keep the house, come here, stay here, let my granddaughters come and visit when I'm here during the week, and be able to still get some extra income and have somebody in the house. And so people don't realize that, well, she's just here on Wednesdays and Thursdays. You know, there might be somebody else a couple weekends a month. I too have rules. I've stayed in Airbnbs. My family stayed in them. We enjoy them. People seem to really put a lot of effort in keeping the house nice and the property nice. I just, I thought it would be a win-win for everybody. I didn't realize that so many of my neighbors who have long-term rentals would have a problem with it. Like I said, I'm going to be there, the one cleaning up. I don't want them to tear up anything. I don't want them to make a mess or be loud or destructive or anything else. I just want to get some kind of extra income. That's all. Thanks.
Does the board have any questions?
I don't have any.
Thank you.
You said your house in Yukon, but it is Oklahoma City limits, correct?
Yes, it
I
is.
guess so.
It's,
Okay.
the address is 3928 Taylor Lane in
Okay.
Yukon, but it is, and in Oklahoma City's, yes, utilities, and so that's why I am here.
I don't have anybody signed up on this one. Does anybody want to speak? We're ready for a motion.
I'm surprised. I instantly got lots of emails, so hopefully my husband did try to get a hold of the HOA president and explain to him, you know, what we're trying to do. We're not trying to allow parties or anything else. Like I said, we're just trying to pay for some of the expenses to keep the upkeep on the house, and so that I still can come back to Oklahoma City and work.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That they
Oh,
had a
man.
problem with it.
Well, they sent in some letters somewhere. I don't know where they went, but I know most of it was HOA and saying that it was a covenant thing.
Really?
And that,
And no one is here to speak against it, right?
well, that's good. I think it's kind of like, I mean, I have the rules of the Airbnb and everything else, just like the man said, so I don't know why they're not here, but.
So I don't have a problem recommending approval. However, 10 years is something that the board normally do not do.
Right.
That's
okay.
like a whole decade, okay?
Right.
So,
I realized that after I applied, I just thought, well, I didn't know if this was something I'd have to be coming back all the time to do, but if it's usually a yearly or however whatever you usually do is fine. I didn't know how often this is recurring.
well,
We didn't have any other Airbnbs in this neighborhood, did we? Okay.
I did see some protest in the file. I'm not sure if they didn't get attached properly, but they are just regarding the HOA rules.
Yeah.
And it was from the Skelton Family Trust, Dave and Marcia Bond. And they sent the homeowners HOA, and that was what it was.
okay, thank you.
And it was their board.
Oh, it's the board members.
It was just in regards to this case, here are the CCRs for our HOA. It's in violation, and under no circumstances would home sharing be approved by our HOA.
Can we just put those in the record? Okay. Ready for a motion?
I will move that we approve case number 15119 for a special exception for a period of 2 years with the conditions that are already written down.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Item number 9, case number 15120, an application of a renewal of a special exception for home sharing for Suzanne Kleiner, located at 2413 Northwest 45th Street.
Hi there. I don't hear very well, so I'll try and speak up. I'm Suzanne Kleiner, Susie Kleiner. I have had this house at 2413 Northwest 45th Street successfully running over the past year. I'm trying to get a renewal for my special exception to renew my lodging for short-term rental. I've had no neighbor complaints, thankfully, over the past year. We had 16 people write in last year that were upset. I apologize to Ms. Lakin for having to field so many emails. But I went around and talked to everybody, and I've talked to especially the people right around me. They've had no complaints over the last year. Hopefully there's nobody here complaining. I didn't hear of any emails this year, so I'd like to seek a renewal, and hopefully for as long as we can get. This is Mindy Navarro. She's my property manager. Helper extraordinaire.
She's out of state, so somebody needs to be here.
Benny, there's no like action center or anything.
No, I wrote that in the report.
Yeah.
I wrote that I checked it out and there's been no
Okay,
action
cool.
center.
Yeah, I forgot my agenda and I'm trying to catch up on this.
You said it
digital
was
thing.
approved for 1 year?
It was, initially for 1 year, because they were fighting pretty hard against me. Last year, we were approved for 7 people with a 3-day minimum. I'd like to be able to move it down to a 2-day minimum. I actually like the 3-day, but sometimes I have a little bit of a gap, and so I would never want to do a 1-day because I have a pool, and I think that would just create parties. We have a camera system outside on the garage and the front door, so we monitor, how many people are coming in, at least initially, and make sure that we're not having parties in the neighborhood.
Personally, I don't feel comfortable saying you have to do it for 2 days or 1 day or 3 days. That's up to you because it's your property.
Sounds good.
So I wouldn't put that restriction on you.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last year, it appeased the neighbors to do a 3-day minimum and only 7 guests in the house. I have bedding to sleep really 11 people, but I think I'd like to at least bump it from 7 people to 8 people. So last year we had put those stipulations. I don't know if that's something that you guys still are part of, but.
So I would just say this for the record, since you're only offering 3 rooms, I would have a problem approving 8 guests in 3 rooms.
Okay.
6?
Yeah.
6?
I know I've done 7 so far successfully with no
Okay.
complaints from the neighbors, so
All
if we
right.
can keep it at 7, that would
Leave
be
it
great.
7.
We have 2 double beds in the front room since it's a really large room, and then a full size in the middle, and then a king size in the master, and then the pull-out is a queen.
An air mattress in the middle room.
Gotcha.
So, and when I'm talking about 7, it's not usually ever
Like
7
6 and a
adults.
half, more like, yeah.
Is that a puppy?
Yeah, right.
Like
I normally
like
ever
a
7
toddler or a small kid or something, yeah.
Right, it's usually small children. So that's why I wanted to get some clarification too on, does the 7 include children or not, that sort of thing. So right now, I only allow 7, so like 4 adults, 3 children type of situation. So I don't know if children are always included in the occupancy maximums.
Yeah, it's more of an advertisement thing. There's not gonna be anybody coming knocking on the door and checking on you, so, yeah. Kind of the honor system.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments from the board? I don't have anybody signed up on this one. Anybody want to speak? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
I would like to approve case number 15120 for a special exception for a period of 3 years with the conditions that are cited, with a total number up to 7 guests.
Okay, that's fair, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll second.
The motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Thank you.
Monica's watching. Might have just gave her a small heart attack.
Item number 10, case number 15121, application for home sharing for Lindsay Long at 17524 Zinc Drive.
Hi. My name's Lindsay Long. My address is 2200 Summer Hollow Lane, Edmond. So I'm applying for a special exception for this property. We purchased this property on May 31st. It's our first investment property, and we took months to rehab the whole thing. We redid the floors, new painting, new lighting. We really made it look nice from the front. We've even had neighbors comment about how nice it looks now that we've revamped it. So we opened it up as a short-term rental in mid-July, and then even though I've lived here for 5 years, I found out 6 weeks ago that you can have an Edmond address but be in Oklahoma City. And so we're applying now. We want to be compliant. Edmond doesn't have regulations on short-term. Jumping through all the right hoops and regulations, so this is why we're here today. We specifically advertise and try to recruit families to be guests. Our title is Kid-Friendly Home in a Quiet Neighborhood, and that is actually the type of guest that we have gotten in these past 3 months. It's usually people who are visiting their family who live in the area, and they just want a place. It's maybe a brother or sister and their kids coming. So yeah, that's what we do. We also have a guest book that tells them our favorite local places to eat and attractions, and we really have a love for hospitality, so we try to show them Oklahoma City, how we like Oklahoma City too. So.
Have you had any issues with the neighbors over the last few months?
No, and we have a lot of, our driveway, it's not just long, but it has a little bump to the side, so it can fit several cars, so we haven't had any issues, yeah.
Anybody have questions, comments? Again, I didn't have anybody sign up to speak. Is there anybody who wants to address this item? Guess we're ready for a motion then.
Okay, and I don't know what we just applied for 1 year. I don't know what's normal, or, because this is our first time, so.
When it comes to home sharing, I
There's
don't think
nothing
there
normal.
is normal.
No,
There's
normal,
no-
okay, sounds good. Yeah,
Kinda
so
make
we'd
it up
like to
as we go
request.
here.
Yeah, we'd like to request for as long as is reasonable to you guys, but, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's, what's reasonable to one
That's
isn't
the gray
yeah.
area, right?
Well, your request is for 1 year.
That's what I put in the application, yes, but if you
Yes.
guys would extend for longer, we
Your
would.
request is for 1 year, so I would like to move.
Okay.
And also, you had a maximum number of guests to be accommodated at 8.
Yes, we have 3 full-size bedrooms. We also have a study, so it's the size of a room, but it just doesn't have a closet. So we have a sleeping in that. It's a study, but it has windows that lift and everything. It's just not considered a bedroom because it doesn't have a closet, so.
So would you be willing to go to 6 guests for this 1 year, and then you monitor it and see how it goes?
Okay, would you consider 7? Because it's often the children, so the study is a
6.5.
kids and.
So my 2 colleagues, they can make the decision.
Okay, yeah,
Out.
sure.
We'll have a discussion.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to be clear that like we have we're not cramming into 3 bedrooms.
Sure.
There's actually a separate room.
Yeah, we just talked, yeah. 7 is fine.
Okay, sounds good, okay.
Yeah. Anybody want to discuss the number of years other than 1, or we're good?
I think 1 would be appropriate.
Okay. So I would like to move that we approve case number 15121 for a special exception for a period of 1 year, up to 7 guests.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Mine's not popping up. Hang on. My vote button is not showing. Yeah, my vote button's not showing now. Sorry. It shows it's active, it just doesn't show it doesn't give me, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, yay.
Paula will take care of you.
You're approved.
Okay, item number 11, case number 15122, an application for a special exception of Roger Elefrakis to allow home sharing at 1913 Northwest.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger Eleftherakis, and I live at 3701 Cactus Circle in Edmond, Oklahoma. And I'm here for a special exception for home sharing at 1913 Northwest. So this is an investment property. We renovated the house. We bought it. We took it down to the studs, completely renovated, changed, put in new rafters. and have built it up. These pictures are during construction, but it's since been completed and passed all inspection. And so we are looking for home share.
Is that an orange thing? Is that a dumpster? Okay. Yeah.
That was a construction dumpster. So the driveway runs the whole length of the property, and there's a concrete pad behind the house.
Gotcha.
Is this your first short-term rental?
Yes.
Other questions from the board? And
I don't see any issues on this application other than the request for 10 years. That might be a little long.
Okay, yeah, this is my first one. I decided I'd go as long as
Sure.
possible.
Totally
There
get
are
the
other
strategy.
Airbnbs on the street already, so I don't know what is normal for this area. It's close to the Plaza District and generally seems open, so as long as you guys feel appropriate.
There's a lot in that area,
Yeah.
for a fact. And I have to agree, Allison, 10 years is a decade.
Okay, is there anybody who wants to speak on this one?
Oh,
Yes.
we do have some.
On that street, yeah, but that area is saturated.
Thank you. Lori? Give
I'm
us your
Lori
name and address,
Norman,
please.
and I live at 1925 Northwest 17th Street. And thank you for submitting paperwork to let us know what you have planned. No one, I know somebody just said there's plenty of Airbnbs. We've never been notified that there have been plans to do. There's one on my street on Northwest 17th. It's been a nightmare. It's 3 houses down from me, and I would do anything to get rid of it. So I would just like to know more information. How many rooms? How many guests? I mean, it's right, my neighbor's here with me. It's right behind her. And we would just like to know, does he have plans to buy more properties that are along there? How many rooms? How many guests? I see the board seems to be, no offense, very lenient. Sure, add 8 people, add 7 people, but there's people that live in these neighborhoods that are having very bad experiences with them. And even if it is in the homeowners association not to have these, and you guys said, well, that doesn't matter. We're trying really hard to keep our neighborhoods up. We have 100-year-old homes. We work really hard, and we work really hard on our HOA boards to keep these, keep things together. And people just come in and build a property, redo it, and say, hey, let's make it an Airbnb and get extra money. Well, we're here working hard to keep our properties up all the time. The one down the street from me has a party about every other weekend, and I try to contact the owner and I get no response. So now that he's applied, I'm happy so that we know what's going on, and I want to know more. And I want to know a number where I can contact and say, hey, this is what's going on, what's happening, more details. Because we've never been notified, because somebody said, yeah, that street has a lot of them. We never knew that. We've never been notified until this one came forward. So.
I will make a comment to that. Airbnb, the app itself, actually sent out a push like last week or the week before, reminding everyone in Oklahoma City and in the Oklahoma City zip code of the penalties and fines that are associated with operating without a license. So hopefully that will maybe flag it for some owners if they're operating without a license, and things can maybe be better from now on, because I do know that's been a complaint with other Airbnb owners too, right? Because this applicant is doing the right thing, coming before the board, and having the neighbors come and testify and say whatever they want, whereas other people aren't doing that. So hopefully that, to give you some peace of mind in that sense, hopefully that will help.
Right, and we live in a charming neighborhood.
Sure.
Right by the Plaza District, and everybody loves to come there. And
you know, I wouldn't have a problem if it was better controlled and, you know, they would come in there and control their property and other things, but we have enough with homeowners that are renting properties out that aren't being kept up without adding this to the problem as well. So that's why we just want to know what's happening.
I'd also say to contact the Action Center when you have issues, you know.
Well, it doesn't work.
Well,
But I know, you're right.
It
I
gives
do.
us a paper
We do.
trail, and it gives
Yeah.
the city a chance to know that there is an Airbnb that's operating, you know,
Right. Yeah.
when it shouldn't be. So, you know, that information is always helpful.
Yeah, we do. That's what I have, because we have a Section 8 house that, like, one of the only ones left in our neighborhood, and we're constantly reporting it to the Action Center and not having, or whatever.
Yeah, and
having-
specifically the Airbnb use that they're using, you know, there's
Yeah.
noise complaints and stuff like that. That's a
Just
way
need to
for
stay on
us to
top
get
of
in
it.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
So if you would just share more information with us, and if we can just get contact information about it, then that would really be appreciated.
Excuse me, I have a comment I'd like to make for the record. First of all, thank you very much for acknowledging the work that we do up here as a board. But as far as being lenient, we are not. We go by what we hear, and we do not add additional people to the request. We take away if we think that 8 is too high in a 3-bedroom home. And also, as you've heard earlier, we can't do anything about what those homeowner associations put forth for their owners.
Yeah.
But I do want this to be part of the record that we don't make those type of decisions. We do not add additional guests to anybody's list, and we do not make their rules and regulations, but we do work to improve them in order to make sure that we're also trying to work with the requester as well as the oppressors or opponents, okay?
Right.
So again, thank you very much for acknowledging the work that we do, because it's very difficult at times to sit up here and deny and to approve at times.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else wants to address this item?
Oh, we've got another one.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Chris Merrick, and I live at 1924 Northwest 17th Street. And I noticed on some of the requests that you had, there were actual applications that said number of years requested. That would be very helpful to get on the notice, because a 1 year, which you've approved a few times, makes sense on a new application such as this. So knowing that information in advance, knowing that you can go up to 10 years is very important to someone living in that neighborhood, particularly with a new application. So I think if there's a way to include the application from the individual that goes out with the notice, just making the suggestion that it would help those homeowners to understand what's going on. Thank you very much.
That information's online,
And
isn't it? Okay. Yeah.
Just so we've never approved a case for 10 years for sure. And I think
but
early on we did a few for 5, but for the most part, 1 and 2 years has been the norm recently, just because there's so many, and we don't want, you know, getting out of hand and, you know, not being able to address the issue timely before it comes back around again. So for sure, shorter terms are definitely something we've been trying to do.
And to address the notice issue, it's my understanding that the ordinance requires that the city send that notice. And that's what it is. It's just notice. Here's an application, date and time of hearing. The information is online.
Yeah, was it agenda.okc.gov? Or, no, that's the old one. It's primegov.okc, yeah. Or okc.primegov. Yeah. Yeah, public meetings, and then the HTML and then PDF versions are available.
Yeah.
Which that information is on the notice.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Roger, you want to address the comments?
Gloria, I didn't hear the other's name, but I I will, understood, and happy to give you our contact info. And just so you know, we also have, I personally have a vested interest.
Roger?
Sorry.
Yeah, we need to get a record, please.
I'm an owner in the Mule and the Press, and own 2 buildings in the commercial plaza district, and so you're always welcome to come by there if you're having an issue. The owner of this building is the same owners of those 2 restaurants, and, but also we'll give you personal contact info. So.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's a 3-bedroom house, and we're asking for 6 guests, 2 per room.
And Roger, I'm sure you do, but do you plan to, have like house rules that you'll provide to your guests that maybe you could provide a copy to Lori as well?
Sure, absolutely.
We'll leave that on you guys to kind of work those details out, but if that would give you some peace of mind, for sure.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're ready for a motion.
I would move to approve case number 15122, application for a special exception of a period of 1 year with a maximum number of guests of 6.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 12, case number 15123, an application for special exception of Addison Horman for home sharing located at 12 North Greengate Drive.
My name is Addison Herman, and I live at 11716 Oakdale Street in Yukon, and I'm applying for a special exception license for 12 North Greengate Drive in Yukon.
You got 4 bedrooms and you're suggesting 12?
10, actually. I have a king, I have 2 queens, and then in the 4th bedroom, I was gonna put 2 double beds for kids, so 10 would be the maximum guests that are in there.
Okay. Are you okay with advertising off-street parking only?
Off-street parking only? Yeah, if that's what needs to be done. There's no HOA in the neighborhood, so parking wherever. We've got like a long area right there before the neighbor's house that can fit like 2 cars, 2 to 3 cars right over there. And then it's a dead-end street, so there's also some parking at the very end, but there should never be that many cars at that house.
Okay. Questions from the board? Nobody signed up to speak on this one. Go ahead.
Number of guests, where are we at on that?
I heard 10.
Yeah, I saw 12, heard 10. Still a little high, but, 7, 8, kind of where I'm at here.
Okay.
The regular number of people for a size that house, or house that size, I think.
Anybody here want to speak on this one?
Are you okay with that recommendation of 8? Okay.
Yeah, 8 would be perfect, because then I can have 2 people per room.
All right, yeah, that works. I can go with that.
Okay. Ready for a motion then?
Did you move it, Mike?
No, I haven't. You want to? Have at
Yes,
it.
I would move that we approve case number 15123 for special exception for a period of 1 year for up to 8 guests.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Item number 13, case number 15125, an application for a special exception of Bob Bailey to allow home sharing at 200 Tiles.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Bailey. I own the property at 200 Taos in Edmond. and I'm glad I went last. Because I heard a lot of things that I'd like to, I think would be important for y'all to hear. My wife and I retired a few years ago. Our grandchildren live close by, and we have another home in another state. So we are not buying this as an investment property. We are buying this as a place to come and stay ourselves for different periods of time throughout the year. We are wanting to do the home sharing to supplement the cost of the property. So it will be temporary or not quite as often as a regular B&B. It's a place where we're going to live as well when we're here, so we are very invested in that. We bought the property last February, I believe it was. We asked our realtor to make sure that there was nothing in any of the neighborhood or HOAs, and our real estate agent assured us that there was not anything that precluded that, so we went ahead in good faith that way. Talked to the neighbor directly next to us. They don't have a problem with us doing that. And we've invested quite a bit of money into the property, primarily for ourselves to have a place to come and stay, but also if we get the approved to have it as a shared property.
You said you're living in Texas?
We do.
You do live in Texas, so will you have somebody local that's going to be able to help you out with management?
Yes, I have a son who lives here. I also, my daughter lives in Owasso. She's actually going to be doing the online, the Airbnb stuff. We've advertised, we haven't started advertising it yet, obviously, but we are going to have limits, 10 o'clock as late as you can make noise, or 6 guests. We have three bedrooms, and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. So,
Did you just lower your request to 6 guests from your original 8? Did you just say that?
if I put down 8, that
Yes, your original request is for 8. It just sounded like you said for 6.
0 years.
Yeah, and on your request, it also say number of years requested is 0.
0. That must have been a typo. I think there's 2 typos there.
Okay.
It probably would have been the 10 being the longest.
I'm so glad you didn't put that there.
Right.
So-
I mean on the years, because we thought that was the part, but I probably should have been a 6. And we'll, after what I've heard today, a couple of years, 1 year, 2 years, whatever y'all think is appropriate. We'll be
Thank
happy
you.
with.
So you are saying 6 guests,
6.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
He's coming back and forth to tax. How many years you think?
Okay.
I'll move to approve case number 15125 with the specified changes and 6 guests only, off-street parking, and other advertised rules in the application for a term of 2 years.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
He's getting ready for it.
Item number 14, case number 15127, a request of Vital Outdoor Advertising for an appeal of an administrative decision for a sign permit in the PUD 737 located at 16901 North Portland Avenue.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, also with me is Cooper Hahn, who is an associate in my office. Mr. Voorhees and Mr. Privet and Ms. Asbury will recall back in August of 2021, we came before you on an appeal of this very issue. At the time, the municipal councilor's position was that our appeal was in fact barred because it was not timely. This board agreed, dismissed our appeal. We filed the appeal to the district court, who also agreed, and ultimately the Court of Civil Appeals disagreed in a 15-page opinion that I trust you've read, it's in your packet, and has sent it back to hear this case on the merits. So, on the merits of this case, I think it's important that we first look to the subject site's zoning, that is PUD 737. Now, Mr. Privet, fortunately or unfortunately, is likely more familiar with PUDs because he gets to serve on both the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. So every other Thursday, he gets to hear me complaining about various aspects of PUDs ad nauseum from this podium. So what Mr. Privet is aware, and I will just say for the purpose of saying it, is that PUDs are highly negotiated documents sometimes, and oftentimes they're not. And PUDs have a couple of ways to look at them. When there are items that are specifically called out, those items are considered specifically negotiated, and that provision, whatever it may be, is what controls. However, there are often times that provisions in the PUD are silent and the base zoning district prevails. So if we look to PUD 737, which is the PUD that governs this site, and specifically at page 5, and it's all in the materials we provided you. Page 5 under section 7.1 is describing the use and development regulations of the tract governed by PUD 737. And what it tells us is that all uses permitted in the I-1 light industrial district and C3 commercial district shall be permitted. Now, here is the important provision. It's the next two words, including conditional, special permit, special exception, and/or accessory uses subject to their appropriate review procedures for public hearings where applicable. So, the use that we are seeking is non-accessory signage. That is a separate use unit within the code. If you look down underneath the provision I just read, it says the following use units shall also be permitted, okay? It's not an exclusionary word like sometimes PUDs have. In fact, most current PUDs would say the following uses are the only uses permitted on the subject site. That language is not in here. Instead, it's all uses permitted on I-1, including conditional. Non-accessory signs is a conditional use within I-1 and C3, and our application meets the conditions set out as a conditional use under I-1 and C3. It is that simple. Now, what the city filed really tries to hide the ball. It is simply that simple. However, if we look to a previous application that is on all fours with this application that came before this board, I believe it was in 2012, under the previous reign of Mr. Voorhees on his time on the Board of Adjustment, just down the turnpike from this site, there was an identical issue with a sign permit that was denied. An appeal was made to this body, and I want to look at that PUD. So that is PUD 1198. It's also in our materials. If we go to section 7.1 of this PUD, again on page 5 of that PUD, it says all uses permitted in the C3 community commercial district shall be allowed, including conditional, special permit, special exception, and/or accessory uses. So again, conditional use. If you look at the uses that are specifically called out, what you will notice is that non-accessory use, the non-accessory sign use, is not called out. So the reason that the board on that day issued their order sustaining the appeal is because the non-accessory sign use is a conditional use explicitly authorized under the PUD. Now, at the time that this happened, there was a significant shift in the way that the Planning Commission did things. Now, you see in every single PUD, unless a billboard is permitted, an exhaustive list of uses. Like I mentioned earlier, it will say the following uses are the only uses allowed. And more specifically, when you go to the signage regulations contained within any PUD filed today, there is a specific section called non-accessory signs. And you are now required, unless you want to argue from the podium to try to get a billboard, you are required to place in there non-accessory signs are specifically prohibited within this PUD. Okay? It was determined that old PUDs didn't have that language, and therefore, based upon the 2012 case that Mr. Voorhees had the opportunity to sit on, these old PUDs, if you meet the conditions, do allow non-accessory signs. So let's look back to PUD 737, which is the PUD controlling the subject site. So we've already walked through the fact that under the 7.1 use and development regulations, all uses, including conditional uses, are allowed. It is undisputed that the non-accessory sign is a use that is conditional within the PUD. It's undisputed that we meet the conditions for that. So then, if you look to the signage regulations, what it says is 10.1, freestanding pole and/or pylon signs, and it lists some requirements. Now, the city attorney's office, I think, is going to point to that as somehow an indication that it's not allowed. So it's important that we look to no further than the municipal code itself when it defines a freestanding sign. A freestanding sign is defined as an accessory sign. And then it goes on. So an accessory sign is a freestanding sign. Of course, we are not an accessory sign. We are a non-accessory sign. And so by virtue of the definition contained in the municipal code, we don't fall under any of the signage contained within section 10.0 signs in our PUD. Finally, I do think it's important to just touch on the brief submitted by the Municipal Counselor's Office on October 3rd, in which they say that each case stands on its own merits. I wholly disagree with that. If this were a variance case, of course, each case has to stand on its own merits, and each case has to meet each and every variance application. I don't get to come up to this podium every other Thursday and say, well, you approved a height variance over here, so therefore this height variance must be met, because the element number 2 in a variance is, of course, that there's something unique or peculiar about the particular site that warrants the granting of a variance. That's not what we're asking you to do here today. Today, you are sitting as if you are a district court interpreting a statute. You are in a quasi-judicial role to interpret a bit of legislation that has come before you in the form of a PUD. District courts are, of course, subjected to being bound by previous decisions. It is no different here today. The cases cited by the city attorney's office are variance cases. This is not a variance case. This is an appeal of a decision based upon an interpretation of a bit of legislation, no different than a district court reviewing a statute. So we do believe that this body is bound by previous decisions. And the previous decision was a unanimous, no, maybe it's 4-1, but it was either 4-0 or 4-1 decision granting the appeal of the administrative decision on an identical fact pattern to this. So we would ask that you reverse the decision made by staff and allow my client to build this sign. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have you provided a copy of the code where it defines non-accessory signs in any of the materials?
I'm sorry?
Have you provided a copy of the code where it defines non-accessory signs in any of the materials?
No, but we could certainly pull it up really quickly. I mean, the broad definition of a non-accessory sign is the ability to advertise things that aren't occurring on site.
Billboard, basically.
I'm sorry?
Billboard, basically.
Yeah, it's a billboard. But it's regulated separately and specifically not defined as a freestanding sign.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Board, we have Laura McDevitt and Susan Randall from our office. Do you have questions of the city attorney's office?
Coming in heavy today with the legal department.
The record reflects I voted on something in November of 12. I wouldn't assume I remember that.
No, I 100%, and that's why I actually brought the order, sustaining the appeal. No one appeared in protest, and it's also worth noting, we point this out in one of our briefs. The city attorney's office had the ability to appeal that decision at that time, and they failed to do so. But you, along with Councilman Stonecipher, Mr. Austin, and Mr. Nick Haruse, all sided with Mr. Laird at that time. I have no doubt that you don't have specific recall of a BOA hearing from 2012.
Let alone breakfast, it's okay. Okay.
Mr. Box, I do have a question, just on your position that we are bound by our previous decision. If we are reviewing this de novo like a district court, I mean, a district court is not bound by a previous decision that it made. I mean, it can change its mind later based on different facts, can it not?
Well, let's take the end of your sentence. There are no different facts.
But we're not bound.
You want to address that?
I would somewhat agree with that opinion in the sense of they are not bound and they could shift their opinion based on policy concerns. However, they are bound by previous final orders. They certainly promote consistency at the district court, especially when it comes from the same judiciary body. Every single judiciary body, quasi-judiciary body, when rendering an interpretation on legislation, would almost certainly try to provide uniform decisions on this identical issue. Additionally, it does bring in the issue of issue preclusion. Here, the party is Oklahoma City staff who made a decision on an identical issue. It's the exact same party, it's the exact same issue. They had the full and fair opportunity before a quasi-legislative body, the Board of Adjustment, back in 2012 to litigate this issue. They did litigate this issue, they lost. They could have appealed, they didn't. They should be bound.
Well, this is a different case. I mean, issue preclusion, right? Like, we're not precluded because these are different parties. Or I guess Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City be the
Sure.
same party, so issue preclusion can apply to the same party. Or their privies. I would say if a different staff member made it in 2012 and a new staff member made it, certainly they'd be privy. Issue preclusion certainly would apply. It does apply to quasi-judicial bodies often. And it simply promotes judicial consistency, which is promoted, I think, by all judiciary boards and bodies.
Because the issue is, it's the PUD 737 and PUD 1198 have identical provisions as it relates to the uses allowed and the conditional uses allowed. And so if we have identical provisions and that decision wasn't appealed, how could there ever be consistency if we're not going to follow the standard that was set back then? There's no factual difference here. It's a different PUD, but it's the exact same language included in that PUD. And again, it's why the city does it differently now. So they did react to it in that PUDs now are required to call out non-accessory signs specifically under the signage section of a PUD, and either state that they're prohibited or state that they're permitted and try to get it. And oftentimes the Planning Commission will just flat out say no, and there will be a technical evaluation within a staff report that says approve subject to conditions. One of the conditions is change language to say non-accessory signs are specifically prohibited. So they fixed the problem moving forward, but that doesn't stop this interpretation from being correct.
Okay, I'm just going to confess, I am not an attorney, and a lot of this sounds like I'm in a courtroom.
I apologize.
No, it's okay, because I'm learning some things. But, so you're asking us to do what? Tell me what you're asking.
So what I'm asking you to do is to find that staff's interpretation of the PUD, that their interpretation of the PUD is my client can't have a non-accessory sign. I am asking you, in your role here as a quasi-judicial officer, to find that opinion was incorrect based upon the facts that I've laid out in my brief and then given to you orally here today.
So is staff here to explain their side as well? Because I'm just listening to you, and I've heard what you said, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I do know how to disassociate different things that I hear, so I would like to hear the rest of the story.
You've heard the whole story, but I'm sure
No, the rest
you have
of the
something to
story.
say.
The rest of the story.
This is Laura McDevitt from our office, and she will tell you more.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. As Ms. Douglas Talley just said, my name is Laura McDevitt, and I'm an assistant city attorney. So yes, to kind of step back here a little bit, what had initially happened was back in December of 2020, the appellant submitted an application for a 672 square foot, 50-foot tall EMD billboard within PUD 737. So based on the language that's contained in the PUD, our office recommended denial on the basis that it was not allowed, and that Section 10, which I'm sure you've all read these briefs that have been flying around this week, that Section 10 of the PUD is an exhaustive list of the permitted signage within that PUD 737. So we are not saying that the appellant cannot have a non-accessory sign. We're saying that Section 10 of the PUD regulates all signage. So if they want to have a sign, it needs to be within the limitations that Section 10 prescribes, which is, I think, 200 square feet and 20 feet tall. It needs to have, if it has a pole, it needs to be fully landscaped, and also the pole cannot be exposed. So under any of those circumstances, the appellant could have a non-accessory sign within the eastern 200 feet of PUD 737. Also, we'd want to point out that at the time that this PUD was approved by Planning Commission and City Council, so I know Mr. Box has made a lot of references to I-1 base zoning for this PUD, and we would point out that at the time that this PUD was approved, I-1 zoning did not allow 672 square foot, 50-foot tall billboards. So it wouldn't have made any sense for Planning Commission and City Council to say, oh, no, your base zoning doesn't allow for it, we didn't describe it in Section 10, and also, we will put it another way, that you can't have a 672 square foot, 50-foot tall billboard. So we think that the language of the PUD was crystal clear. Also, this notion that the board is bound by a board decision from 10 years ago is erroneous, and that the facts are starkly different. That was an entirely different PUD. I don't think that there's any argument by Mr. Box that PUD 1189 and PUD 737 are somehow overlapping. These are very different locations, and I would say the critical component is that in the other case, staff had previously issued 2 permits for a billboard, and one had already been constructed. And so when the board was sitting reviewing that application, was the board going to require that the applicant tear down their billboard? No, they let it stand. So, and there's no specific language in the order that says that they interpreted the PUD a certain way. I would submit that there is no obligation on behalf of this board to follow the interpretation that the appellants are arguing here today.
Mr. Chair, might I respond?
Yeah. You got anything else at this time?
Not at this moment.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So, I very much respect Ms. McDevitt. We find ourselves on the same side of lawsuits. In fact, we were together yesterday on the same side in a pretrial conference. Sometimes we find ourselves on the other side. Her argument is one of convenience. The idea that the reason that the board in 2012 reversed the decision of the staff because of the error, because 2 separate permits have been issued, is nowhere memorialized in the order. I mean, the order simply says, based upon the evidence and arguments presented, the board found and concluded that the officials of the development center erred in their revocation of the sign permit, and the appellant should be sustained. It simply says that. I'm not saying that PUD 737 and PUD 1198 are the same. They're not. They're different. Except where they are similar is what is important. They are identical in their sign regulations and the manner in which they interpret uses. Now, Ms. McDevitt's argument that Section 10 is an exhaustive list is simply inaccurate, because if we read Section 10 at page 7, it says, all freestanding and attached signs shall conform with the current sign regulations except for the following additional regulations. Now, we've already read the definition of freestanding signs, right? That is an accessory sign. So we know now, based upon the municipal code's definitions, that it's not a freestanding sign, so let's scratch that one out. So what does that leave us with? An attached sign. Well, this is a freestanding billboard, very much not an attached sign. Scratch that out. There is no language whatsoever that this is an exhaustive list of signs. The way that a PUD would provide for an exhaustive list of signs is if it said, the following regulations shall be the regulations that apply to all signage. It doesn't. The regulations contained in Section 10 only apply to freestanding and attached signs, which we know, based upon definitions in the municipal code, a non-accessory billboard is not that.
So,
Do you feel now more like you're a courtroom than ever?
I really do. And again, thank you very much for explaining it to me, both of you. But my question is, did you and/or the client that you're representing back in 2012, did they know what the codes and the restrictions and regulations were at the time?
Yeah, so again, two separate cases. In 2012, they knew what it was, and they submitted a permit, and staff got it wrong. And we know staff got it wrong because Mr. Voorhees and his colleagues reversed staff's decision and said the PUD, as drafted, allows the non-accessory sign that you want, okay? And so it's no different.
Soon after staff knew that this board knew that it was wrong, that it was reversed.
Well, as soon as the permit was reversed, Mr. Laird, on behalf of Mr. Mazahari, filed that appeal to the Board of Adjustment timely.
So it was an immediate turnover?
Yes, and it's same thing here. The only caveat is we had to go to the district court and the Court of Civil Appeals, who sent us back here. So we got involved. I read the PUD, and in my mind, I read it the same way that Mr. Voorhees read this PUD 1198 back in 2012.
But he doesn't remember.
That's fine. That's why we have the order memorializing his decision.
I'm just going to say.
Statute of limitations is run out.
We're expected to not remember, and that's why the fantastic staff at the city and the clerk for the board memorializes orders, so that we know decisions and we know why decisions were made. And so here, it's the same thing. My client acquired the property, asked us to review it, and I said, well, of course, it's allowed, because a non-accessory sign is a conditional use in both I-1 and C3, and it's not specifically excluded. Therefore, based upon statutory construction and previous decisions of the board, we're in good shape. Now, we got into a dispute about the timeliness of our appeal that ultimately we prevailed on when the Court of Civil Appeals said that we were right and sent it back to you. But the issue before you is the same as 2012. Non-accessory signs are absolutely permitted under PUD 737.
But are non-accessory signs of that size permitted?
Yes.
Because
The exhaustive list argument is simply wrong, because the exhaustive list, one, it doesn't say this is an exhaustive list of regulations. It only says these are the regulations that apply to
you're almost
freestanding.
doing what they did to you.
What's that?
Never mind. I'm sorry. No. It's just, it's still a little muddled for me.
I know. It's rare that we end up in these types of like highly technical legal discussions. I much enjoyed the discussions of the Airbnbs, but you are thrust into this very strange position on these appeals, because it's a different role than hearing variances or hearing arguments about bedrooms and parking on the street.
And overturning a decision that was previously made. So
Right.
that's what makes it very difficult for me, because again, it was previously made, and I'm listening to what's happening now, and we're making a decision that will affect 2022.
Well, I'm not asking you to, I may be mishearing you. I'm not asking you to overturn the decision from 2012. I'm asking you to make the same decision that was made in 2012.
The same, okay.
Chair, I mean, you understand what I'm... Okay.
Procedurally, I'll agree with you. I
Yeah.
don't know if they do, but
I'm asking you to
procedurally.
make the same decision that was made in 2012, not reverse the decision. Mr. Voorhees got it right.
Apparently I did. Okay, Laura?
I would just like to clarify briefly that these are very factually different. In the previous case, staff had issued a permit in 2009 to allow for a billboard to be constructed. It was put up. Then they subsequently returned to allow for the billboard to be converted to an electronic message display. that permit was also issued. And so this billboard had been operating for quite some time when it came before the board because the permit got revoked to convert it to an electronic message display. So that was the specific issue that came before the board in 2012. And while I would say that the 2012 order does not specifically say the grounds for which the staff interpretation was reversed.
That's fine. It says all evidence presented. So looking at the PUD and these other documents from 2012, I understand the position from 2012. My question for you is why, just generally looking at all of this, and I'm looking at the sign provision from 2012 in the PUD compared to this section 10, why does the city care? Is it because it's so large? Is that why it was denied?
So we would say that if they want to have a non-accessory sign, it just needs to be a sign as described in that section 10 of the PUD.
Okay.
And that was my understanding about the whole thing, regardless of whether it happened in 2012 or if it's happening in 2022. That's exactly what I was wondering.
It's not a size issue, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, whether or not it was a size issue.
The size issue is a new issue to us. It was denied originally because the staff said that the sign wasn't allowed based upon use.
Okay.
Okay? So our appeal is that. It is our opinion that the size is a wholly separate issue. It was denied based on use. Okay? And so what we're seeking is a reversal of the decision that the use isn't allowed. We think that we meet the code with whatever the size is we're asking for. The city doesn't get to decide that they're going to fight stuff because it's too big, right? Whatever the code says in terms of size is what the code says in terms of size. We're here on a use issue, nothing more.
But I would just say that what was submitted to staff and what got denied was a 672 square foot, 50-foot tall pole sign. And pylon signs are specifically regulated in section 10.
And the code allows us to build the sign that we submitted. What staff is doing is mixing issues because they're going back now to section 10 and saying we have to meet the size requirements in section 10. But of course, the size requirements in section 10 are specific to freestanding signs, which of course are defined as accessory signs, and attached signs, which of course is not a billboard. And so the use is allowed. That's what we're asking you to decide.
What is the rest of the PUD? I'm sorry if I forget this, and there's just a billboard plopped in the middle of it.
What's that?
The rest of the PUD that it's surrounding this thing.
General commercial and light industrial.
Okay.
Commissioner Purver, are you asking if the site is fully developed?
No, I know it's not, but
Okay.
I know that, the rest of the PUD has something to do,
Right, so the base zoning of PUD 737 is I-1 and C3, and at the time, the 1999 Planning and Zoning Code was in effect when this PUD was adopted,
Yeah.
and it did not allow for 672 square foot billboards in I-1 or C3.
And as far as moratoriums we've only got the one on I-40 right now, right? I know we had a citywide moratorium on billboards at one time.
Yeah, the moratorium is still in effect
Still in
while
effect,
the sign code update is pending.
However, that has no relevance to this discussion. I mean, just to be clear, you would agree with that?
Correct.
The moratorium is on new applications for PUDs and SPUDs.
Yeah.
It's wholly irrelevant to this discussion.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just caused some creative sign applications over the years, I know.
No, I would say no. We're using the face of the very clear language provided in the PUD allows it because it says all conditional uses. There's no dispute that a non-accessory sign.
Very clear, I think, is maybe the problem. It's not very clear, and kind of that's where you come in. And
Well, yes, I am glad that there's a space for me in this world to interpret these, but I do think it's clear because it says all conditional uses, and there's no dispute that conditional uses are a use under I-1 and C3.
So just so I'm understanding what you're arguing, Mr. Box. I understand that you say section 10 applies to the accessory signs, right? Those limitations that say it has to be on the east 200 feet, it has to be 25 feet tall with 200 feet of separation, whatever. Though you're saying that applies to accessory signs.
It applies to freestanding and attached.
Right, which freestanding
yes,
is an
are
accessory
defined as
sign.
accessory. Yes,
And
ma'am.
so you're arguing that your non-accessory sign is not governed by section 10.
Correct.
And so my question for you is, so is it just this weird gray area for non-accessory signs to be as big as they want?
No.
Okay.
It's a great question.
Okay.
So at the outset, when I was describing PUDs, in the absence of a specific regulation,
right,
the base zoning district applies.
Thank
and so I-1 will have a provision
Perfect.
that sends you to Chapter 3 under the
Okay.
sign regs.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if the planning commission would have seen a billboard like in the middle of a PUD, we probably would have raised an issue and said, take out
Well, maybe
the
not back in
billboard.
99.
No, not nine. Well, this is 99. This is what, 21 is when we approved this?
Our PUD that we're asking you to interpret is, was approved in March of March of 2000, but it would have been submitted to a planning commission end of 1999.
That's one we're doing now.
That is the PUD we're asking you to interpret. Yes, sir.
737, okay.
Yes.
All right, okay.
So I think this begs the question, and I think I know the answer, but I'm assuming that the sign that you're proposing complies with the base zoning requirements.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm trying to find them on the screen, but it's kind of hard.
Laura, you got anything else you want to add?
If I may, just to kind of wrap things up, we would submit that the legislative intent in 2000, when this PUD was approved, was to just specifically negotiate all of the signage in Section 10, and it would have gone against the intent of going through all these steps to describe how these signs were going to be architecturally compatible, and the size and the exact location in the 200 most eastern feet of PUD 737. It would entirely undermine that to allow for a 50-foot tall, 672 square foot EMD when that was not what was even contemplated at the time the PUD was approved.
So you're wanting us to adopt kind of an originalist view of this PUD from 1999?
Yes.
But of course, that begs the question then, if we look to PUD 1198.
It's a good year.
In 1198, under Section 11, under signs, it says that 2 monument signs with a maximum height of 12 feet and a display area of 100 feet shall be permitted on Memorial Road. And of course, we know the 2012 BOA case permitted a much taller, bigger billboard than a 12-foot monument. It is a pole sign. And so that would be a wholly different interpretation of a PUD than has been previously done. Isn't this a little more fun than Airbnb discussions?
Definitely more interesting.
Anything else?
I
from
can't think
either
of anything.
Okay. The board have any questions? Comments? Then we're down to a motion. I can't make a motion. Somebody want to take a stab at this one?
I will. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to word this.
Sustain or deny the appeal. Right. Since I know where this one's going next, it might be good to have some specific findings.
Yeah.
Definitely some specific findings.
And that might be something we should not speak from the bench and maybe draft after the fact, as to the specific findings.
Yeah. I think we have to,
We have to do it, okay.
yeah.
Okay, never mind.
I mean, that'd be a really cool procedural move.
We could take it under advisement. Take it under advisement.
Let us draft whatever.
We'll come back next, in 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Hold on.
You're thinking of like an executive session type deal? Yeah, it's not really applied to
I don't-
this type of thing.
We're not signed up for one. We don't
Yeah.
have that on the agenda.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, let's blame it on Box for doing this.
Yeah,
I get blamed for many things, I'm fine.
he's fine either way.
Yeah.
He'll go to court too.
No, I know.
So, and Laura, you might want to address this part in the order. It says the case is remanded to the Board of Adjustment with instructions to address the merits of the second application, so.
Yes, so it's our interpretation that the Court of Civil Appeals remanded this to the Board of Adjustment to hear the appeal on its merits and not revert to the timeliness issue.
Yeah, I read the Court of Appeals opinion to say start over.
Yes, and so you'd be making a decision, is that the way you interpret it? You'd be ruling on they'd be ruling on the application itself.
Right, the
Because it's
application,
on the merits.
Right.
sorry to
That's
interrupt.
how I think.
Approving or whether we want the sign or not, yes, essentially.
Right, whether or not the specific sign application that was submitted here, which is a 672 square foot, 50-foot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whether,
That's what I wanted to hear from you, thank you.
Can someone please explain to me what inadequate notice is?
Oh, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Could
10
someone-
weeks.
What?
They have a,
Inadequate notice, how much notice do you have to
they
give
have,
someone?
I think it's a 10-week appeal. No.
Oh, in the Court of Civil Appeals decision,
Yes.
they were saying that the denial was, for the first permit application,
too
was
late, yeah.
inadequate. So that's no longer at issue here, because we're really,
Okay.
this, what is now before the board is just the merits of the case, of whether or not they should be allowed to have the billboard within PUD 737.
Begrudgingly, probably.
Yeah, the notice issues were disposed of at the,
And again, if we were to vote for or against it, we're not saying what size it has to be, because that's something
Correct.
separately.
that's right.
Just whether or not you're permitted to have it.
You either sustain the appeal and agree
Yes.
with me that the PUD allows for it, or you deny the appeal and agree with Ms. McDevitt that the PUD doesn't allow for it. Those are the options.
To be clear, the appellant could still submit an application for a different sign at the same, in the same PUD, that's 200 square feet tall, or and 20 feet tall.
He wouldn't do that, though. He'd know we deny it. But, yeah, to me, just looking at the PUD and, it's, I can't go any other way but sustain, so.
I likewise would move to sustain case number 15127, the appeal of the lower administrative decision regarding the denial of the sign permit because of the definition of non-accessory sign and the fact that section 10 of the PUD is not applicable specifically to this specific instance.
like to deny. Is that a motion? I'll second.
Yeah, that was,
Okay.
I think that was a motion.
Okay, the
Call it a
motion is to sustain the appeal for the reasons you stated.
Correct. Maybe to be more fully developed, and I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Okay, we got a second? A yay vote is to sustain the appeal, nay is to deny. Did I say that right?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay? Or,
Thank you.
Get out of here.
okay. Additional items?
I thought it was yours the whole time.
I thought it was yours the whole time.
Okay.
Wait a minute, we're not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going to follow the agenda, because I have other business. No communications reports, there's no citizens to be heard unless you guys have something to say. Other business, I'm going to take a minute and thank and recognize Paula. It's my understanding she's moving on to another position. I have really enjoyed working with you on the board. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. And good luck. Okay, I'm out of other business now. Is everybody ready to go home? Yes. Okay, adjourn.
I'm going to stay.
Well, that was an interesting one.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
It was